Hello, everyone. This is Chuck Frydenborg. I am the CEO of MarketMuse, and I am delighted to introduce to you DeShaun Porter, the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Engagement at Hilton. Good morning, DeShaun.
Good morning. It's a pleasure in which to be with you today.
Well, as you and I both know, we had, well, for me, it was the pleasure. For you, it might have been the burden, but we had the experience of working together at Rosetta Stone, I'll just say a while back.
So let's not put a year to it.
Nah, but it's so good to see you again.
Thank you. Same here.
As we planned CSC Live here at MarketMuse, I challenged my team. I felt that through the success of last year's event, which was our first end user conference, that we had created a valuable and powerful forum. We had over 1,800 people join us over a 3-day period. And as I look towards this year's event, I felt it was important for the company that we made the event about more than thought leadership. I wanted us to put a stake in the ground that would enable us to take another step towards being the company that we want to be. In doing so, I looked at our experience a few years back when Black Lives Matter exploded on the nation's consciousness. And I thought about our experience, and our experience was particularly challenging. I think us, like a lot of companies, wanted to do something, but we really didn't know what to do, right? We actively engaged and put statements out on social media. We rebranded our logo to include the Black Lives Matter, colors. We proactively worked to be more diverse in our hiring. But for a company our size, that's not a switch you can pull and create massive change. It's super gradual, right? So as we look back at that, it led us to want to focus on helping our audience understand how companies, large and small, can embrace diversity and drive meaningful change. And as I thought about guests that I could have join me on such an important topic, I mean, frankly, you were top of mind. And that was before I started to do my research. I found Hilton's external diversity brochure. What you all have accomplished as an organization is stunning and so impressive. Fortune 100 best company to work for 2 years in a row. Diversity Inc.'s top 50 companies, and I'm obviously reading this, but for supplier diversity, people with disabilities, mentoring, diversity councils, top companies for LGBTQ employees, 58% of global managers in Hilton are women. I could go on, but that's why I reached out, right? Because I think a lot of folks out there, a lot of companies are struggling with how to make diversity an impactful thing that not only reflects well on the brand, that's secondary, but makes the employees' experience where they work fulfilling and comfortable. And what I'd like to do today in our conversation is start with a word that keeps popping up in that brochure that I referenced earlier. Hilton, in part, defines diversity through the word belonging. What does belonging mean to you and to Hilton?
So thank you for that. Yes, most definitely. But belonging for us essentially means having a space where you feel accepted, appreciated, and most importantly, that you feel seen. Right. I think that several companies now, and Hilton is no exception, we are wanting people to show up as their authentic self. But in which to be able to do that, not only does it take courage from that person, It truly takes a foundation set by the leadership of the company in which to be accepting of all diverse backgrounds, accepting of the differences, and actually taking a step forward in which to celebrate those differences. And that is where you end up finding that spirit of belonging.
Really cool. Yeah, I mean, when you think about the words that are embedded in belonging, it's feeling as, it's comfort. It's feeling part of a larger entity that you are a meaningful part of. There's so many elements of that I think immediately drive to employee retention, employee happiness, and fulfillment.
Agreed.
Good stuff. So I referenced that we worked again a while back together at Rosetta Stone. When we were together, if memory serves, you were focused on talent management. I'd love to let our audience today better understand your journey from being a talent management focused HR professional to focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, and engagement.
Yeah, most definitely. So I can give some historical context there. I actually, when I went to Florida State University, I studied multicultural business operations in finance with a minor in economics. During my time there, I actually took up a study abroad program and lived in Spain for quite some time. I also traveled extensively with my friends and my family throughout my earlier years. So it was then that my passion for people and cultures and travel and having a genuine curiosity of the differences and the celebration of those differences, that's really where it started. And so definitely through college, came out of college and went into human resources. I did a small stint in banking, where I was a people leader. Absolutely loved that. Finding ways in which to inspire and motivate talent was just definitely a passion of mine. And then that essentially matriculated into doing a little bit of M&A work. And then, of course, finding a space in global learning and development. And so, again, that is the influencing of people, understanding how people think, how people can meld, how do you bring success through different learning tools, operations, resources, all of those things. And that took me into becoming a human resource business partner, if you will. And I think, Chuck, that's where we kind of came together, right? And had our opportunity to really get to know each other and work alongside. And so that was a phenomenal opportunity. Now, through all of that, I've always continued to have a passion of being an ally and an advocate for others. So it was a natural transition to essentially, when I was tapped, move into this role of the global head of diversity, equity, inclusion, and recognition. There's strong synergies between the DEI work, if you will, and recognizing your talent. Where you recognize your talent and they feel appreciated, that's where you're going to be able to retain them. But also there's that inclusion piece, and people are going to stay where they feel included, where they feel they have a voice. And as those two worlds collided, definitely it ignited the passion that was already inside of me and gave me the ability in which to just serve in a greater capacity.
Thank you for that. I would love to understand yours, or better understand yours and Hilton's philosophy on how to drive the inclusion measures that you've been so successful in doing, and how that actually interweaves with the recognition piece. I think recognition is something that any manager of people struggles with, how to thread that needle to ensure that it's done frequently enough, but that it's also impactful when it happens.
Definitely. So I can share this with you. I think, Hilton, it's a true mantra of ours that Hilton is diverse by nature and inclusive by choice. Recognition is also a choice, but we consider it a business imperative. There are amazing things that talent is doing on a daily basis. And so what we've done is we've put in place some global recognition programs that leaders can essentially tap into and leverage. They're run throughout the year, different parts of the year, and it's definitely executed from a center of excellence position. And so whether it's a nomination driven program or we are inspiring people to do peer-to-peer recognition, but essentially we're providing the tools from the center in which to make recognition easier. Because again, while a lot of people can walk around and they can say like a quick thank you, or you might not think about it, it's how do you kind of infuse that and not in a mandatory way, but you show people the value of what recognition can actually do, from creating a sense of belonging as well as also just establishing the foundation for where people can feel appreciated.
Thank you for that. And I think one of the key words that you just said that really jumped out at me, and I could actually feel myself starting to smile a bit, was inspire. Right. We always, have so many talks with people, when they first start in management, about the difference between managing and leading. Right. And so much, I think, between the difference between those two words and being effective at leadership, that difference is inspiring somebody. I feel that word is the key towards unleashing someone's potential.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. Could not argue that point at all. I think it's so critically important. And again, that's what creates that sense of belonging, right? That people are looking for. They're wanting to feel inspired, and leadership has the capacity and the capability in which to do that. I think gone are the days where you can really just come to work and be a manager. No, people are wanting you to ignite a fire under them. They're wanting you to take them to the next level and help develop them. They're wanting to get that true feedback, right? But it's not that punitive feedback. It's how can you bring about a different level of understanding in terms of developing someone.
That's perfect. Thank you for that. I mentioned at the outset during my lengthy introduction of you and your accomplishments, I spoke for a few moments about the recognition that Hilton has received. As impressive as that recognition is, I also understand that external recognition can't be how you define the success of your diversity and inclusion programs. I'd love to have you spend a few moments talking to our audience about how you measure the impact of your initiatives at Hilton.
Yeah, excellent question. Listen, it's been a journey. Hilton did not just kind of start on this DEI trek in the past few years. This has actually been in place, and we've been on this journey for well over a decade. It was 2012 that we actually stood up our first team member resource groups. Lots of businesses refer to them as employee resource groups. But because we wanted to definitely elevate essentially the voices of the diverse perspectives that existed within our company. Now, when you start thinking about measuring the impact, we really started at that time with some engagement surveys, cultural assessments, to get an understanding of how people felt about the company. Of course, they were anonymous, not just the company, but also leadership. Right? Is leadership presenting you with the purpose? Are you able to see what you are doing on a daily basis and tie that to the ultimate business imperative and the objectives of the company? Because again, that's what's driving that sense of belonging, that sense of purpose. So when we took that kind of engagement survey and all of that feedback, we realized, listen, there's some people that definitely feel as though they have a voice and they have a seat at the table and they feel comfortable to use their voice. And then there's some that might be a little bit quieter, and it's because we don't necessarily have that diverse environment, or we're not inspiring that spirit of inclusion to where people felt comfortable. And so how do you essentially change that? Well, we know that you can change that through several different ways. It's continuing to take pulse surveys as you're implementing new programming. It's the celebration of Heritage Months. That was a pretty easy one, right? There's almost like a heritage. There's something to celebrate every single day, 365 days a year. And then out of the 12 months, every month is to celebrate a different culture. And so if you're elevating that and you're educating people on it, then that creates that sense of awareness. but also that sense of comfortability in which to say, I can actually be myself. I don't have to hide that I am Caribbean American, or I don't have to hide that I'm LGBTQ. There's a whole month now that this company is literally putting forth messaging to celebrate me. And so it creates that comfortability. I think we also did, we definitely worked with several external organizations in which to benchmark our progress and our programs. So you can submit in which to say, this is what we're doing on a human resource side. This is what we're doing for DEI. This is what we're doing as it pertains to recognition and benefits. And you can get basically analytics back. You can always do your own internal analysis based on what you see externally, right? But basically submitting some of that data to really get a balanced perspective, that provides benchmarking for you to continue to enhance and improve on those programs. I think another thing that we've done, and this is kind of like within the past 5-6 years or more, is really get detailed with our analytics. Everyone knows what gets measured gets done. So if you are wanting to make real progress, not performative, but if you are wanting to make real progress, it really goes down to setting some targets. And they can be definitely, you want to stretch yourself a little bit. So I encourage those targets to be ambitious, but to be realistic. And then make sure that all of your guidelines, all of your policies, and all of your actions are aligned to meeting those targets for whichever year you set them. And so we actually did that. You might see, if you saw the brochure, you might see that last year we publicly announced that we're committed to achieving global gender parity and 25% ethnic diversity at the corporate leadership levels in the US by 2027. And every single year we are going to be measuring our progress up until that point. We feel confident that we're going to definitely be able to achieve that. But we're also holding leadership accountable. Obviously, the public is going to hold us accountable, because now you are seeing literally employees during interviews ask, so what's the diversity of your company? What are you doing in which to lead that? People are wanting to literally be with companies that have that greater diversity initiative in place. And not that they're just speaking to it, but they're actually working to achieve something. And so establishing those targets, making sure that your employees are aware that those targets are in place, how you are seeking to essentially achieve them. What are you doing from a recruiting perspective, right? As you know, do you have a diverse set of interviewers interviewing for diversity? Because there's always going to be bias that's going to creep in. We all have bias. Every single one of them. But we also all have privilege. And so how can we utilize our privilege in which to change the dynamics of where we are now and really be able to drive that business imperative change that is needed and bring more diverse voices to the table?
That's great stuff. And I don't know, folks, if you know, but I'm sitting here taking notes. So I hope you all are too. I actually have a very tactical question for you, because it's something we've struggled with. You mentioned doing extensive survey work of your employee base. I would love to just take a deeper dive into that for a moment. I think any business leader on this call would shake their heads if we said, hey, do you have trouble with response rates on survey? Everybody does. How did you all work to overcome that?
Yeah, so, I think in smaller companies, you have to discuss the anonymity of it, but people also have to believe that their feedback is going to be received. It's not going to be investigated. That's key, right? You have to establish that trust. And then also you have to be mindful of when you are doing a survey that you're going back and you're sharing what are the themes that came out of the survey. And then here is what we're going to do. People are exhausted by just providing feedback and it falls on deaf ears.
Sure.
So they're
just
wanting
an effective use of my time.
It's kind of like, why do I keep giving it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do I keep giving it? I've got other work to do. I've got a million emails in my inbox and there's more coming in and the phone is ringing. No. And so you make a hard decision to say, I'm not going to do that if you don't necessarily believe that it's going to bring about change. And what I have seen to be effective, particularly in smaller companies, is launch those surveys, let people know that you're going to be doing them on a certain cadence. Maybe you decide that you're going to do them twice a year. Maybe you decide that you're going to do them quarterly. And perhaps you can do different topics. You know, it doesn't have to be every question, the same question quarterly, but you can maybe decide to hit on different topics. What are the areas of your business that you might feel is there's opportunities? And then that's going to allow you quarter after quarter, if you do it on a quarterly cadence, in which to continue to modify your questions, modify the topics to get at the hearts of what's most important to your employees at that time. Because there's so many influences that we have. Yes, you have whatever your business objectives are, but then there's the external environment. That's literally changing our business environment every single day. And so we have to be ready to change with it. And to do so, ensuring that your employees have a voice in what does that look like? How does MarketMuse or C2C show up? Right? This is so critically important. And you know, if you're able to get their particular feedback and then weave that into what is the next evolution of your business plan, or what are going to be the programs and initiatives that you're launching in the second half of the year, then that's also going to tie back to them feeling valued, them feeling recognized, and them feeling heard.
Thank you for that. For my next question, I'd like to shift the focus from business leaders, people leaders that are trying to affect change through some of these initiatives that we've talked about. I'd like to shift the focus to the individual contributors that want to be inspired, that want to feel like they belong. A recent survey of SEOs and content strategists found that 91% felt bias in the workplace that had a negative impact on productivity and a sense of engagement. What advice would you give to those individuals to influence change?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's also a glaring statistic, right? Because 91% of people feeling bias in the workplace, that it leads to a negative impact on productivity. That is incredibly concerning. Now, I will start by saying I'm a believer that unconscious bias is real. I'm also a believer that conscious bias is real. I think starting with understanding that everybody has a bias. See, life is made up of a collective of experiences, and there's no two people's experiences who are exact same, not even if you're twins, right? And so how can you start to reassess your life experiences? Determine what makes you have the beliefs and the stereotypes and the biases that you essentially have. Then it's not that you're going to completely eradicate them, but it will allow you to take control of your biases. So then it does not have you drive a different outcome. So if you realize that you have a bias is showing up, whether it's in an interview or in a conversation, it allows you to say, okay, let me breathe a second. I recognize that that's a bias that I have. Now let me work to be open. Let me make sure that I'm leading with openness. I'm listening intently, right? Because that's where you're going to get some of that greatest growth, not just for yourself, but also for the person for whom you're speaking with. So when I think about what can individuals do, it starts with you, 100%. Understand your own journey. Dispel the stereotypes that you know. So, back in the day, people used to say, oh, well, only women are nurses. But then think about, even if you don't know any male nurses, think about the TV shows that now have male nurses. That is the dispelling the stereotype. So there's nothing that is just 100%. And so leave space for that. And it helps you learn. I would also encourage you to evolve your circle. Think about who you're spending your time with personally. If there's organizations that you're in, if there's community service activities that you're doing, if you're taking your kids to, different field events and sporting events, what is the makeup of that circle? Who are you spending the time with? Because that's going to continue to influence your understanding of different cultures. Be intentional about trying to meet somebody new. LinkedIn, I think, is like an amazing thing. If you realize that you are, you're in a smaller organization, but then you're in a small town and maybe it's not quite as diverse as you'd like it to be. Okay, well, there's a whole slew of people out on LinkedIn that you can reach out to, in which to just say, hey, I saw you post this, thought this was very interesting, would love to learn more. Do you have a minute? And expand and evolve your circle, because then that will help you get to understand the perspectives of others. And really, it's kind of like that conscious empathy. Think about walking in somebody else's shoes. There's so many opportunities for us to show up and be allies and advocates, particularly in this day and age. Yeah. Every single day, there is another culture, another heritage, another race that is being attacked in some way, shape, or form. And if it's not that, then it's a school shooting. I don't know anybody who can't relate to that in some way, shape, or form. We were all kids at one point. So even if it's that, even if you have no kids today, you have no nieces and nephews. So how do you take that moment in which to say, I can show up for somebody else. I can reach out and say, hey, how are you doing with this? Right? It's part of not just being a friend, but being human.
Yeah, I think the word that you shared that just jumped out at me was be intentional. I remember a gentleman I worked for a long time ago giving me tips about interviewing, and his feedback was, don't just like the people that you interview that are like you and are motivated like you and have a motor like you. You've got to dig in and be intentional about understanding the value in the differences between you and somebody else, and embrace those differences. It's a lot easier said than done, because we're all wired to do the same thing all the time, but you need to be intentional and purposeful to drive change.
Agreed.
Well, thank you for that. Hilton probably has a bit of an advantage over a lot of the folks that work at companies during our conference here over the next 3 days, from a resource perspective. But I thought it would be worth a few minutes to talk about the support systems that Hilton has in place for its associates, so that the audience here can understand what's out there that you've tried that works, that has made a difference in the lives of the employees at Hilton.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think we've tried several things over the years. Hilton is a 100-year company. There's a true belief that travel brings people together. And so we're able to benefit and leverage that unification that comes naturally. But if I was to put it in the category of ESG, right? So we've got environmental, social, and governance. And if you just take the top two, there's partnerships that we have forged with organizations. So as we think about establishing our pipeline, or we think about giving back to the community, and we get our team members involved in giving back to their communities and participating in volunteer activities throughout their own, in their own silos, in their own networks, in their own communities, that is impactful. But it's also a two-way benefit. Right? We are out there doing something that is good for the community. It's definitely showing that we are wanting to contribute and that we're wanting to give, but then it's also so incredibly rewarding for our team members. And so thinking about, and every company has a different set of dollars that is set aside in which to support philanthropic events. But even taking it to that, there's no company that doesn't have any money dedicated to that. So thinking about where are those dollars going, and how can you essentially get your employees engaged in it? How do you make them aware that this is what we have? These are the organizations that we've partnered with, whether it's World Central Kitchen, or we are donating to a disaster relief fund, or we are talking about the environment and, wildlife and basically preserving wildlife. All of those things are so important. And while it might not be 100% important to you, it's the idea that we are out here doing something that is greater and bigger than just us. And where you get that engagement and that I would say that connectivity with your employees, that's going to continue to span greater empathy, greater, generosity, and all of those different things. So partnerships is definitely key. And then we have partnerships on the recruiting side as well, thinking about where are you recruiting from and how can you get your employees engaged in the recruiting effort? Is everyone posting the roles to their own diverse network so we can make sure that we're highlighting that?
Really good stuff. Thank you. Last question. And again, thinking of our audience here, how or what would you recommend to our audience, folks that work for organizations where I'm quite certain the majority of them would love to play a role in creating a DEI commitment or initiative to their organizations? How would you recommend that these folks help get their organization started to make a difference?
Yeah, so I'd say a few things. I'd start with be authentic, be yourself. The second thing is use your position of privilege. Every single one of us have privilege, every single one of us. And don't see it as a threat, don't see it as punitive, but utilize your position of privilege in which to be an ally and advocate for somebody else. And I go back to, it's not about being performative. Performative is when you're saying, I fully support you to somebody's face, but then when you're in a group of your peers and jokes are flying, that you're not necessarily speaking up. Right? That's performative. So think about that. I would also, definitely encourage you to think about how you can utilize your voice, not just inside of your own meetings, but consider the organizations for which you might be a part of or who you're doing business with. If you are in charge of partnerships or you're, running marketing, think about who it is that you might be pulling in to consult with your company. Can you find a diverse supplier? Can you find a minority-owned business? Because again, that's allowing you to just not say that you're just doing something, but actually put the actions behind it. Could it potentially take you a little bit more time? Yes, because we all have our Rolodex of people that we go to. And it's very likely that Rolodex of people is because you share these strong similarities. And it doesn't have to just be gender. It doesn't just have to be race, but there's some similarities that make you feel comfortable with that person. So stretch yourself outside of that and think about how you can essentially influence different decisions within your company and hold each other accountable. Right? Accountability, that kind of goes back to, you asked the question around measuring and tracking our progress. A lot of that is rooted in the accountability. If you say that you're going to do something, then make sure that there are actionable steps in which to get there. And then there should be a collective accountability circle around that. And I think those elements are essentially key. If I was to take another easy one, consider your voice on social media. So many companies have chosen to speak out on different things. Now, I'm not a proponent of speaking out on everything because there's so many crazy things that's going on in the world today. And we've got businesses to run, right? So you have to draw the line somewhere, but then also recognize the impact that might be having on your employees, and then making sure that you're essentially checking in. And that's something that anybody can do.
That's really great stuff. All right, I'm going to quickly summarize what you just said for everyone. 5 things. Be authentic. Utilize your position of privilege, which was eye-opening and something I think we all have to really think about. How can you use your voice? Hold each other accountable. Consider your voice on social media. DeShaun, thank you. I'm cognizant of you agreeing to spend an hour with us, and I'd love to give you the opportunity to use this forum, which you've been kind enough to join, to share anything else that's top of mind for you that you'd really like people to think about today.
Yeah, I appreciate that so very much. Like I said, there's a lot that's going on. We have to make sure that we are taking care of each other. Mental health is a real and palatable topic that companies are now having to really delve into. And so just doing those very small check-ins when different things are happening, whether it's internal or external to the business, doing small check-ins with each other, and then also continuing to expand your own horizons of learning. So then you can show up and you can be empathetic, conscious empathy, and show up as an ally for individuals is kind of what the world is needing today. And not only that, it's going to bring about greater perspective for you and your role, for your company. And of course, the diverse representation is always going to take us to the next level. So I encourage that.
DeShaun, thank you so much. We're 2 hours apart here. I'm in Richmond. You're in DC. I need to make sure next time I'm headed north through the nation's capital that I give you a shout.
Please do. I would welcome it. Definitely.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.